Ben Askren, welcome to the podcast.
What's up? I believe I've done this before, but we're doing this again and it should be a good time. You seem like you're crushing it.
Yeah, things are going well, man. Yeah, we did one, I think like 2 years back, and I'll mention it in the intro, the number, so people can go back and listen to it. But yeah, Ben, you just came out with a book, and it's been a few weeks now. How's the launch going for you?
It's going really well. Did a lot of media. And I was just saying to you before we launched, it's there's not enough wrestling people that put up books. It's obviously the other community is MMA, and I feel the same way about that community, not enough books. I am an avid reader. I love to read. And biographies are my favorite as well. And there's just like I can only think of about five in the last 20 years so you got Rulon, you got Robles. Oh my, I started a couple more before the show.
Henry.
Henry's I felt like was kind of written for like people who didn't know anything about wrestling. So I didn't really love it, because it felt like it was like written in a dumbed down fashion for the non-wrestling fan. But yeah, there's not a lot. So hopefully the wrestling community is pumped up. I know I can be kind of because of my presence on FRL, kind of a divisive figure because the fan base, it's funny because the Iowa fan base say, oh, I hate them, and then the Oklahoma State fan base say, oh, I don't like them, and the Penn State fan base, and it's kind of something that I told Christian before on the show. It's like you just can't worry about it, right? You just have to say how you feel, and then at some point people will understand that like you're just going to say it how you see it, and they might not love it, but that's how it's coming out.
Yeah. Well, the good thing about the book though is like all of that aside, it's like you get vulnerable here and talk about some of the struggles, and I love just all of
Yeah.
the different turning points. And I'm gonna go a little bit Jocko style here. Typically, I don't read
Okay.
from a book, but I love the section of freshman year. You go to Fargo,
Yep.
you go 0-2, and
Yes.
Coach Steiner said this to you. He said, Coach Steiner told me that I had made the big match different, that I gave it additional gravity. And this is like the first time you kind of had your eyes open to performance anxiety.
Yes. 100%.
So how did you start to adjust that and kind of correct for it?
Well, yeah, so and honestly, I do mental Mondays. I've done them. I'm actually gonna do a good one. There's actually a story I forgot to put in the book. I don't do a lot of seminars anymore. But I was in Arizona for the in-laws for Thanksgiving, and I popped into a local Liberty High School here. And we do, yeah, I always do question and answer with the kids because I think like what they can gain from a mind is always more important than the technique. And they asked me a question, it brought up a story. I'm gonna save it from a mental Monday on Facebook, but it made me tell a story. I totally forgot. I hadn't told forever. And I forgot to go in the book. But so with performance anxiety, it was just the notion of I feel like I'm not too proud. So if someone were ever to give me advice, I just accept it. And obviously, given the results, I knew he was right. Like, I wasn't. I mean, even though I wrestled to the top of my performance, I'm not going to place at Fargo that year. I just wasn't that skillful yet. But I wrestled about as bad as I could have gotten. It was a really poor performance on my part. So when he brought it up, it was like, oh yeah, that's obvious. Like that was, and then something I adopted it immediately because I realized and that had a really negative impact on my performance. And if I can fix this, that's going to be huge for me. So I think that's something where kids can realize like, yes, no one's ever perfect. And the quicker you can realize your vulnerabilities and try to fix them, the better off you're going to be.
When I love how like this turning point, and you mentioned a couple big ones, this turning point led you down the track of sports psychology, and then
Yeah.
the other big turning point at Missouri your freshman year led you down the track of scrambling, and we'll
Yes.
definitely get to that. But so like after that Fargo, you said back in the book that back then there weren't a lot of tournaments to wrestle at, so you had to
Done.
sit with that pain for months.
Yeah.
And like what did you use once you got back up into the season? Was there any like mental trick you used to kind of make sure you weren't making things too big of a deal?
Yeah. It was okay, yeah. So I mean, obviously I think we're the same age or really
Yeah.
similar. I remember. Yeah, so I mean back then it was Fargo and then you didn't wrestle again until high school season. I remember I did try to do a college open when I was older in high school, but they said like get lost or something. So for the performance anxiety, like I said, it was he told me, what kind of like his strategy, which was I believe it was talking about fishing or something. And but the whole idea is just take your mind off the match, like don't think about it. And that's something I kept all the way through my wrestling, mixed martial arts, the entire career, because I can't obsess and I can be an overthinker. And so keeping myself from not doing that is really important. So no, it was just I knew it. Like I said, I knew it. I knew he was right. I tried to put in practice. And so, like I tell kids this is even later in my career, when I was flying to Asia, I would fly a friend. I would pay for a friend to go to Asia with me, just so I had someone in the locker room whose job was not to coach me. You know what I'm saying? Like, just keep it light. Hey, we're just gonna keep it light. I'm gonna have someone I can talk to. I generally like my coaches as well, but I wanted someone who was just, kind of lighten the mood, keep it easy, because yes, that is something people can do, is build things up too much. Then they create that performance anxiety and they perform really poorly.
And I remember on another, might have been a T-Row and Funky, still one of my favorite podcasts, man. That was an awesome show. You mentioned that before the NCAAs one year, one of the Missouri donors saw you like disc golfing, or heard that you were disc golfing, and like they got all worked up about it. Like, he needs to be focused. He needs to be serious. Does this ring a bell for you?
Well, I think we may be confusing a few stories. So I have a few funny disc golf stories. But the NCAA finals I was picking my hair on the butt. I just told Keegan O'Toole the story because we were talking. Coach Smith, hey, Coach Smith, we love you, but he has a little bit of anxiety sometimes. So I was talking to Keegan about this. I said, we were riding the bus over, and Missouri had never had a national champion. I lost him in the final in the first 2 years, and I was picking my hair. And it's one of the kind of buses where it's like the open seating. I could see Coach Smith over there like stressing out. And I said, Coach Smith, what are you worried about? I'm gonna whoop this dude's ass, And everyone started dying laughing. And then it was like, we're good now, So that was funny. But no, the disc golf, I have two funny disc golf stories. One time at CKLV, that's coming up this weekend. Actually, it's gonna be a great tournament. I convinced Raymond Jordan to go disc golfing with me, right? And so I paid for the cab. This is before, like, I don't have a credit card. That's how long ago this is. But there's no Uber is very far from existence. So I call a cab. I get the cab to come pick me up. They take me to the disc golf course there in town. And we get there, and it's like $30 or whatever, and I thought it was gonna be like 10. And so I only have $30 in cash on me at that point in time. I think maybe I had more, maybe my parents were coming or something, but literally in my wallet, I only had $30. Raymond didn't bring his wallet. Right. So we played the disc golf game, and I'm like, shit, dude, we got to be home in like an hour or whatever. We're going to work out. So it's like, we ran 5 miles home.
What?
I didn't tell Coach Smith that one. And then the other one was my senior year, the pit duel. So I was expressing Keith Gavin, the guy I would wrestle in the national finals. Well, I played one round of disc golf, and my buddies got me to start playing another one, and I got hot. And so I'm like, dude, I could set my record. I could set my personal record. I'm not leaving this round of disc golf. And so, right, I literally made weigh-ins by like 4 minutes or something. I was almost late to weigh-ins, but then I went out and decked him that night, so it was great.
Wow.
But I set my personal course record also on the second round, because I was like, oh, okay, I'll play a few holes and then I gotta leave. And then I was like, all of a sudden I got hot. I started burning everything. I'm like, dude, I'm not leaving. Like, I'm gonna cut this one close. I am not leaving. I'm gonna set my personal record today. So yeah, a bunch of those type of things.
Well, it reminds me of another awesome story you told near the tail end of the book. You were at a weigh-in wrestling Okie State, and you had a guy from Okie State, not Pendleton. And
nope. Brandon Mason.
Tell us this story for folks who haven't got a chance to see the book yet.
Yeah, well, this is another sports psychology story, and so this one it's talking about how if someone has a specific goal in mind, in wrestling, we're obviously our opponent, and we need to sometimes cause them to have an emotional reaction to get them to do something stupid in order to make the mistake we need for us to pin him, right? Because I was talking about pinning this guy, and I had not pinned him, I think in three attempts, maybe 3 other attempts, I had not pinned him, and I really wanted to pin him because this is a national duelist semifinals, us versus Oklahoma State. We ended up getting 3 pins. I pinned Josh Wagner pin, and maybe my brother might have got a pin that duel. We killed him. But so I'm not going to use the language because it's my wife's right over there. She swearing around the kids. But I said, Brandon, are you going to be a little B today, or are you actually going to wrestle me? And he got like so flustered. He's like, I'm going to wrestle you. And then sure enough, like I get one takedown, and then he steps up. I cradle him and pin him in like a minute. And it was I had not been able to pin before. So I got in his head to where it elicited an emotional reaction. And so, I tell Keegan this, he still has, I don't think he's taken my advice yet because he really wants to pin people, but in a dual meet format, the other coach says, hey, don't get pinned, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's your job. Like, I don't really expect you to beat this guy. He's really good, but how about you don't get pinned? And so the guy knows their job is to not get pinned. I mean, another guy who has would be a great example is David Taylor. If you look at David Taylor's pin rate during season versus during NCAAs, it's hilarious. It's way higher at NCAAs because people actually try to wrestle him because it's an individual tournament, and they're not saving their team anything if they get pinned. So they actually go wrestle them and they get pinned, Whereas during season, you would see people doing all kinds of different stall tactics against David. So you need to create an emotional reaction to get your opponent to do something that they would probably not do if they're calm and thinking through things.
But it's crazy because a weigh-in's usually like a pretty subdued time. Everyone's kind of keeping to themselves, and you're in front of the whole Okie State team, and you say, it's like, hey, are you going to be a little bitch? Or are you going to wrestle me? Like, I can't. Did people like say anything, or was it kind of?
I knew. I mean, my team was used to it because I remember that later that day I was taunting Roger Kish because I knew I was going to bump up, and I was asking if he was scared if I was bumping up. I think he's still me over that. I talk a lot of wrestling in this book, and a lot of these people like head coaches and stuff, and like in those scenarios, I guess I seem kind of like a mean guy or a bully, but it was more like, hey, I have an objective, and I know what is going to help me achieve that objective, so I need to go do it. Like, I'm sorry, I'm not friendly, and that's kind of like when you talk about Keegan or some younger guys. I've told them this, like, if you do something here, you can get them to get mad, and then they do something stupid, and then you pin them. But they're like not at that point where they're like, I don't know about doing that. It seems like kind of mean.
Yeah. Well, it's more so, like you said, just trying to get you closer to your goal. And it reminds me of when you were back in high school carrying the boombox. And I had never heard of this. Even before the book, I had Marcus Levester on the podcast about 6 weeks ago.
I saw that clip.
Yeah. And I was like, dude, like, and, for folks who don't know, Marcus, unbelievable. Unbelievable. Yeah. But he said that, you would carry this boombox around, and he said you were the takedown king. And I'm like, I didn't realize that. And then reading your book, you take down, let him up guy. So my question is the top game something that evolved from your scrambling opportunities, or do you kind of focus specifically on top at a certain point?
I was always like decent on top in high school, but I don't know. I set this goal. So my freshman year, I would have been relatively good on top. Mostly cradles. I didn't do a ton of other things. And then my sophomore year, I said, hey, I want to set the state takedown record as my goal. And then my junior year, I said, I want to set the national takedown record. I didn't get it because that son of a bitch, Joe Warren, he had 60 Joe Warren. I love Joe. I'm going to give him a hard time. Joe Warren, you had 60 matches. And he got 487 takedowns. I only had 38 real matches that year, and I got 401. So, Joe, if I had 60 matches, I would have caught you easily. So, and then my senior year, I went back to kind of just like regular wrestling. And I pinned a lot of people, but no, it was kind of out of necessity because I definitely was not having the type of success that freshman year, and that was eventually what led to scrambling. But I was kind of clingy, that's my body style too. Is like I'm not fast and explosive. I have really good static strength where I can hold on to things. I can squeeze things for a long period of time. I got a pretty good feel where I'm clingy on people. So I think that was kind of always within me, and I just I had to focus more. I was forced to focus more on it. But I still think I don't have all my old matches, so it'd be fun to go watch them. But I tell Keegan this, and I tell other athletes this that I coach is like a lot of like if the guy on bottom knows my goal is just not to get pinned, it is really hard to pin them, right? So what you need to do is you need to create some scrambles, and then catch them off of a takedown, right? It's almost way more likely to catch them off a takedown than actually take them down and then work through the process of being turned. There has to be a large skill discrepancy. Like if I'm way better than you, I can work through the process of a turn and you won't be able to stop me. But if you're pretty damn good, like that's going to be hard. So I'm going to have to kind of catch you off something, get you really tired. That's another big one. Make you mad. We talked about that already. So there's kind of like a lot of psychological things that are, in the process of pinning someone, because it is pretty rare when someone is so much better at, at the level we're talking about, so much better than someone else that they can just go out there, grab them, turn them over and pin them.
Yeah. It's and you look at someone like Spencer Lee, who's not necessarily a pinner, but even more impressive when he does it
really is.
at will like that.
Yeah, I mean, he really is he would probably be the number one. I've said this before. His dad got mad at me because I said he gets tired, but then which is totally true. It's indisputable. There's evidence. But the compliment I gave Spencer Lee, which I think it's like one of the biggest compliments ever. There has never been anyone in the history of wrestling. So think about all the people who ever wrestled collegiately. There has never been anyone who has the ability to go put 6 points on the board as frequently as he does. So I mean, if you go the first say minute of a Spencer Lee match, there's a really high percentage of matches where there's 6 points on the board. Like more than David Taylor, more than myself, more than anyone. Yeah, more than any, I don't think there's anyone else that can compare to him in college wrestling history of like the frequency that it's 6-0 in the first minute. And obviously 6-0 or greater, right? Because against some people, it's almost over by the first minute. So he has such an ability to turn people over, and yeah, that will be one where he can't pin them, right? Which is what we're talking about, pinning, but
Right.
he is so willful at getting the arm back, and then obviously he's got a handful of options: the roll through tilt, the reinforced bar, the bar, right? So he's got a bunch of options from there.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating, and that story is one of many that it's just awesome. It gets you so fired up. And the one I had no idea about, though, your senior year of high school, I did not realize that you not only were you injured, but you didn't place. Was that something that shook you at all, or did you kind of know going in you weren't ready?
I mean, I didn't love it. No, I got hurt. I got hurt at sectionals pretty bad, and I couldn't really walk. But I'm like, well, I'm not gonna get. So it was an ankle sprain, and I'm like, well, I'm not gonna get hurt worse, right? So I mean, and like, what am I here for? I'm here to try to win state, so I'm gonna go try. So I wrestled on my knees, and I beat the first kid, and then I lost to the second kid, and then I'm like, okay, I'm done. I'm not gonna win state. I lost. I'm out of here.
And then went on to Fargo. Now, you have a story that reminds me a lot of my first big experience. I had never been to an NCAA's Big Tens, but my mom took me to the '04 Olympic trials in Indy when I was in 8th grade,
Awesome.
and I'll never forget it.
Wow, wait, I'm actually kind of older than you by a bit.
A
I thought
little
we were
bit.
the same
I'm
age, so
33.
I'm 38. Jeez, I'm
Yeah.
old.
So you're like a good
I
half.
wrestled in that trials.
Yeah, and that's what I want to talk about, the match with Agam. And but before we get to '04, I just remember when I went to the '04 trials, I was the same age as probably when you went to the one in Texas. I just remember vividly. I don't remember the matches as much, but I would sneak into the warm-up area and watch Joe Williams warm up. And it was like just the most incredible thing to watch these guys warm up. So I wanted to ask you, when you went to Dallas as a high schooler, all by yourself, 2000, was there a match or was there anything in specific that really you remember to this day was like just eye-opening to you?
Yeah. Well, I honestly I can remember a lot of it. But so there was a USA. I said this. There was a USA wrestling camp. This is so funny now that I'm like older and I run camps. But like that's what my parents signed me up for. And then you showed up and you sign in or whatever. And I don't remember what they said the like the chaperone type situation was, but dude, I had no one chaperone nothing. Like I was just doing it. I wasn't a bad kid, so I wasn't like drinking or doing drugs or nothing like that. But it was like, hey, if I wanted to go, I remember one time it was like you got home from session, it was late, and they said your bed check was 10 o'clock, but no one ever checked on you, like I said. And like there was a hotel bar area, like open area, and it was like I just went and wandered around because it was like there's all these Olympians down there. I'm like, oh my God, that's Tom Brands, that's John Smith, that's Bobby Douglas. It was like, so it was like, I didn't have the audacity at that age to go talk to these people, but it was just like wandering around and there was all these, really, really elite level wrestlers. It was fascinating. So I know one of the people in 2000 that I was watching, and it was because he was from Wisconsin and he was really young, was Garrett Lowney. I think he made the team when he was 20 and he would win a bronze medal that year in Greco. So I know that was one of the guys that I was watching. The Steiners were wrestling. As I mentioned, they were my like the Wisconsin Wrestling Federation like state coaches at that point in time. So I know I was watching them. Yeah, there was quite a few people I was interested in at that point. I remember Colette had a really good match with, I believe, Bill Zadek.
Yeah.
I can't remember who Terry Brands. So Terry Brands made the comeback and made the team. I don't remember who he beat. He beat the guy. The guy coached at overtime.
Terry
right?
Bowman's.
Kerry Bowman's. He coached overtime, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, I remember a lot of those matches where I remember I was really disappointed because one of my favorite wrestlers at the time was Stephen Neal, and he lost to Kerry McCoy after winning the world title in 1999. So I remember being really disappointed that he lost because I think he was one of my favorites at that point in time.
Well, it's funny because I was thinking through this morning. I'm like, how many world champs did we have? World or Olympic champs did we have between 2000 and 2008? And I was thinking through the Olympics. Obviously, Slay won, but it was after the fact. Was there any other champs from that Olympics in 2000 besides Slay?
You mean who are people who were already world champs at that point in time?
No, who won it there? Or
Well, who won in 2000?
is it
Okay.
just Slay?
Oh man, now you're quizzing me. Okay, so Terry won a bronze. Sammy Henson got a silver, right?
Kolek got screwed.
Oh, I got screwed.
Slay
52 would have been McElravy, or
bronze.
yeah, and then 67 was Slay, 87 was Gutches, maybe, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then 213 was like maybe Dominic Black or someone to that effect. That or
Yeah,
Melvin? Is it Melvin?
might have been Melvin.
I
Yeah.
got the question. I think I might have got the team. That was 22 years ago. So uh USA, I'm gonna look at USA 2000 Olympic freestyle wrestling team. Okay,
We
let's
might
see
be
what we got.
missing like 114 if they still had that year. That was the
119
last year.
119 was the lightest.
Okay.
All right, Sammy got bronze, Terry got gold. I'm sorry, Sammy got silver, Terry got bronze, McElravy got bronze, Slay got gold. 85 would have been Gutches. He did not place. 97. I'm looking at just the medals.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man, Curtin Easy. Remember that guy? He was a beast. Yeah, and the heavyweight was McCoy. Ty Mazoff, they let him keep his medal. They should have taken all that dude's
Take
medals.
that away. That's
He
crazy.
tested positive so many times. He was kind of ageless because he got a silver in 2000.
Jeez. And Yoel, he's still relevant. That's crazy.
Right? Yeah.
Was the Yoel Satiev match, was that a dive, you think, or was that a straight up win?
Hard to say.
Hard to say.
Hard to say with the Cubans. I have witnessed firsthand a Cuban discussing his payment for throwing a match. Yeah. So yeah, I think there's probably a good chance that there was some money. Their world championships from, I think Adam and Yoel wrestled the 1999 World Championships, I believe, or was it 2001? I don't remember. One of the years. It's a really cool match, and I don't remember. I think it's online somewhere actually.
Yeah, those are. I don't know that one. I just remember watching that finals, that inside trip. I'm like, man, it just looked a little. I mean, nothing, not taken away from the great Adam Satiev.
Yeah.
I mean, unbelievable. Yeah. So you go to the trials, you get this firsthand experience, and I love how you call it these ignition events. Yeah. Like it's almost more important than going to like the youth nationals is to see a big event.
Way more important in my opinion, especially when my pet peeve, Ryan, because I coach youth wrestling, is at the youth level, there's not really actually a national tournament. I mean, there's national level tournaments. So like probably Tulsa, which I don't really like, is probably the best. USA Wrestling has a Folkstyle and Freestyle Greco Nationals. But the amount of the best kids that show up is not even semi close to, say, a Super 32, UWW Cadets, Fargo, these type of events. Whereas if kids win those events, you're like, they're national champions. So I can't stand it. And, we have an All-American wall. We don't include anything sub-high school because it's just not right, because they're not really national tournaments. So my pet peeve is all these stupid tournaments that just throw nationals on the end of it. It's just like, dude, why do you need to say nationals? Mm-hmm. Like, yes, I understand the fact that you're allowing anyone to wrestle from any state. And so I guess therefore it makes it a national tournament. But it's kind of preposterous in the notion that now these parents say, "Oh, my kid's a national champ," or "My kid's an All-American," or whatever. It's that one is infuriating to me. But yeah, so I mean, like we do an ignition trip every year for AWA. Last year we went to Missouri, did a duel with Virginia Tech in Northern Iowa. That was one for us. And then this year, unfortunately, there was no we were looking for a good duel before New Year's and not on Thanksgiving weekend, because Iowa Penn actually probably would have been fun in the local vicinity of Wisconsin. So, Minnesota, Iowa, Northern Iowa, and there was not really any great duels before New Year's. So we're going to the World Cup, and that's in 2 weeks.
Oh, wow. I was going to say Iowa State this Sunday is going to be wild.
Yeah, we already have. What is going on that day? There was something going on that I can't recall what it is right now that we couldn't do that one. But yes, that should be a really awesome duel.
So you brought up World Cup, and this is something I
Yeah.
was going to ask about. 2008 World Cup. Who's on that team with you over in Dagestan?
Oh man. So Andy Rovat. It was Andy Rovat. It was Kurt Backus, Steve Mako. Who was below me? Was Schwab or Freyer or
Was Henry there?
I don't think Henry was there. Maybe Nick Simmons or Hazelwinkle. I don't think Henry was there. And then I believe Zadok was 61 or 60 at that time. I believe Zadok was 60. Oh man, now you got me. Yeah, you're
That's a
quizzing.
well. I've never. I'm working on a project around that time, and I totally forgot about the '08 World Cup. And the fact that it was in Russia is, that's when you're really going to get their best lineup. And you scored off against Sargouche.
Yeah, and he actually obviously wasn't the guy that year because Satiev would make a comeback. So I did decent. I was 3-1. And my only loss was the Sargouche, and obviously that was the 3-period system, So I think both periods I was losing really close at the end, and then it's like, well, you got to go for something because you're losing. So what's the point? Type thing. Yeah. So unfortunately, also he pulled my hair out. I talk about it in the book. He was about the dirtiest of dirty wrestlers ever. Really was. I mean, you can talk to anyone in my era there, and they will repeat that fact.
Even if you watch him wrestle JB at the 2011 quarters,
Oh,
like
so dirty.
filthy match,
Yeah.
filthy.
Well, let's see. So yeah, dang it, I can't find our roster. Yeah, they have the results, but I cannot find something about what the roster was.
What was like when you went
Yeah,
over there? Yeah, no problem.
yeah. Go
I was
ahead.
saying when you go over to something like that, they're like, what was your kind of your first impressions of going to Russia and seeing wrestling at that level?
I was pumped. I wanted to compete with the best guys, and I got a chance to compete. So I went to that tournament, and then I went the next week. I went to Kiev. I don't recall what the tournament was. Um, yeah, no, I was excited. I mean, honestly, like part of me wishes I got to live a dual life, and part of me got to keep wrestling and go to all these tournaments and stuff like that. But obviously, I chose to make the decision to fight after the 2008 Olympics. But no, I was pumped. It was awesome. I think I went 8-2 over the two tournaments. And I talk about the match in Kiev. I totally got cheated. It was such shenanigans. So I got to get a feel for all the things that people had been talking about. You hear all these stories, right? Because at that point in time, 2008, it's not like you can go watch video of Colette or McCoy getting screwed. You hear these stories, and then you're like, oh, okay, and then you get there and it actually happens. You're like, oh, got it.
Right. Well, and when
Yeah.
you think about the Russia's always one of the top countries, if not the top. You're super into youth development. What do you think they're doing unique, or what do you think is a little bbit different about how they're approaching it for their youth and like high school age kids?
Oh, hold on. I think I found the team for you. Oh, this is the Olympic team. Damn it all. I do. I don't know. I always want to spend some time there, and I never really got to spend some time there. Um, so I can't say for certain. I think one of the things America's figuring out is they are figuring out the sparring thing, which is important, wrestling through positions and not just a bunch of super basic type positions. So I think that is really important. But they also just have it's such in their culture, it's like, why is wrestling good in Pennsylvania? Well, because wrestling is good in Pennsylvania, it's part of their culture, and a lot of the people really enjoy it. And it's been that way for how many years now? 30, 40, 50. I don't know. I don't know how far it goes back. It goes back a really long time. So I'd say something like that. Obviously, and I hope you don't discount this, Ryan, because some people do. Ryan, they're all cheating on PEDs, all of them, right? And that should not be neglected when we think about the success they're having. Like, are they great wrestlers? Absolutely. Not taking that away, right? But what effect is all the performance enhancers that they're taking to have? I don't know. I don't take them. So I don't know. I don't know how much better I would be if I took PEDs. I'm not certain, right? But the fact of the matter is, when you look at the McLaren report, you look at a guy like Ty Mazoff, who's got bumped up. I actually got bumped up to 6th at the Olympics because 2 guys above me failed, or maybe 5th. It was 5th. I think I bumped up to 5th because I took 7th because they do it stupid. And 2 guys failed, so I got bumped up to 5th. Like, so,
Mm-hmm.
like, all of them are cheating, and I think sometimes we neglect that notion, but I think it shouldn't be written off as minor. So obviously they're really good wrestlers, and I think a lot of sparring, and then obviously like I said, gets in their culture. But I think the PEDs are there also, something everyone should acknowledge.
Yeah, we've all watched Icarus. If you haven't, it's
Oh, it's
insane.
such a good movie. If you haven't watched it, you gotta watch it.
And then have you watched the one he did, The Dissident, on Jamar Khashoggi?
No, but I know about Khashoggi.
So the same director who did Icarus, Brian Fogel, he did a documentary called The Dissident, which is about the murder of Jamar Khashoggi in the embassy. Really insane documentary.
Okay, I need to go watch that because his was good, and that story is something that not a lot of people know. It's interesting.
So do you, to that end, if you think that the cheating is still going on there, and why wouldn't it be if they've been doing it for so long?
Sure, yeah.
Are we like the only country that doesn't dope, or are there plenty of US wrestlers that are doping?
I have never seen it firsthand, but I wouldn't be all that shocked. I mean, one of the things I think about, why I think the answer might be we are not that much. And I know you're right. Like I said, I never saw it around me or anyone in my immediate circle. But one of the reasons I think we're actually maybe not is when you look at USADA, they've started testing the UFC fighters, right? And so I think they started in 2016 or 15, somewhere like that. So if you started going to look, okay, how many people tested positive that were fighting the UFC at that point in time? It was a lot. I mean, they were doing like, I want to say it was like 25 to 30 positive tests per year. So you think, okay, cool. Well, so that means, I'm sure some people are getting away with it, right? But there's still this many that are getting caught. And then you look at wrestling, and there's almost zero that are getting caught, right? And so it's like, okay, well, if people are actually using it like they were using the UFC, because in the UFC, there's a lot more money involved. Generally, people have access as well. You think they would know how to get around the test better than the wrestlers who don't have access to the amount of funding that they do. But you see like a couple positive weed tests, and like that's it. Like you can go look through the USADA database publishes all the positive tests, and in wrestling, it's if you take weed out, there's not a lot. It's a really small number.
Well, even NCAA though, it's like I've never seen the NCAA come out with a report that someone tested positive, which to me is just insane.
I don't know if the NCAA actually tests. I know USADA test though.
All right, so
I'm going to USADA's website. Sanction.
Perfect.
You can do it by sport. So let's see. We're gonna put some shame on some people. When was this? Here we go. Wrestling. Okay, Rayvon Perkins, Oliver, which we know that one was shenanigans. Oh, John Lorenz. So that's actually a steroid right there. But then Stephanie Lee, marijuana. Oh, you had Dayton Fix and Victoria Francis, both at Osterine, which is maybe I don't know who Michael Duncombe is. He tested positive for steroids, but I've never heard of him. Yeah, there's another person who refused to give their sample. Yeah, it's really few and far between. They're testing positive. Yeah.
Well, it's something definitely to keep an eye on, and before we sign off on Russia, let me get your thoughts on this.
Okay, let's do it.
Do you think Russia should be allowed in the Worlds?
Yes, 100%.
Me too. 100%.
What the heck? Dad, this is weird. If you go through this, there's a whole bunch where it says name removed. I did not know you could remove your name on this. That's interesting.
Well, there were some guys this year who got some faulty tests because of something they eat at the Pan Am. So I don't know if that.
Got it. So maybe they pulled their names off or something. Yeah. So I think Russia. I mean, so this is I told Flo they should just do the damn card, because if you look at UFC still has plenty of Russian fighters. I was actually one of the times I called them was I went to Bellator 2 weeks ago in Chicago, and the last 3 fighters on the card were Russians. And the first fighter on the main card was a Ukrainian. It's like, these guys are not doing the war, and I don't know if I'll be called unpatriotic for this, but this is how it feels like. Who is right? There's been a lot of armed conflicts in the last, say, 30 to 40 years. Who is the person who says, oh, the armed conflict is just and acceptable and we should be able to do that? Like, are we gonna have a judge that says that every single time and say, oh no, in Olympic athletics, this person cannot compete because they have an armed conflict that is not approved? Like, is the is the IOC approving armed conflicts now? Like, I just feel like,
Right.
where do you draw the line?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this is like probably the most unpopular thing I've ever said in the show, but I look back to the '04 Iraq situation. Like, we're bombing the crap out of people. Like, no one's stepping in for us. Like, I don't, it's just like, who's right and who's wrong? Tough to say, but like, who is the overarching judge,
And unless you have, it's like, how are you going to determine that? And, I feel like with anything, you need to put parameters on something. Like, here's how we're going to determine when a nation is removed from the Olympics. Like,
right.
That's it. Yeah.
So as you go through your career, Folkstyle career is very well known. You had a very short runway to get ready for 08. How did you make the decision to go 163?
Well, really, it was actually the guy you mentioned earlier, Joe Williams. I talked about this book. I beat him in a practice match, and it was like, I knew I was always wrestling up in the summers. Like, I'm not big. I'm kind of, even now, I'm kind of like, I like to eat. I work out almost every day, but I do like to eat. And so I'm probably like 195, right? And me being like lean is probably like somewhere between 180 and 185 is really lean for me. And then college seasons, during the seasons, I would generally hover a little bit below that, somewhere like 177, 178. I was really disciplined on my weight because it can really negatively affect you. So I was wrestling up every summer because I knew it would make a serious commitment to go down. And at that point in American wrestling, no one was thinking, because like today, there's college wrestlers who really actively compete at the international level. During that period, there really wasn't. Henry skipped college and he was college age, but I was the second youngest guy on the Olympic team that year, because people didn't really actively compete that much during their college career. So I would always bump up because my main focus was my college career. I wanted my college career to be great. I wasn't willing to kind of sacrifice my college career for my international career, because if I would have had to make 163, and I did, I would have to get way smaller, right? So I had to really, really shrink myself. And so that was what I did, because I knew I was undersized. I mean, so actually, and Mogul Wall, he was kicking my butt. He was the next weight class up. He beat me a couple of times, and he was kind of kicking my butt in the practice room. Above that, and he was sucking a lot of weight to make that weight class, because he couldn't beat Cormier up at the next weight class. So he was just so much bigger than me. I did actually I had a win and a loss against Andy Rovert, who would make the team, the Olympic team at 84. So
was that a big upset for King Mo not to make it?
That was a pretty big upset, yeah, at that point in time. So I think 74 day before is pretty small for me. It was doable but hard. Somewhere like 167 to 170 probably would have been better for me. And then that was, we talk about the factors why I didn't continue wrestling. Obviously, financials were one. Financials in mixed martial arts are way better. But another one was like, dude, like I had to be on a diet pretty much year round to make that weight class. It was really, really hard for me to make 163. So that was, that was not ideal at all. And then I wish they would have the current weight classes, because the system they have now with the 10 weight classes is great. I would have wrestled 79 kilograms all through college. It would have been perfect, because that's the exact same as my college wrestling weight class. I might have made some teams at that point in time, because if you split the talent levels, like, I wasn't far off. I was, I think I was fourth and fifth at 84 kilograms. So, I wasn't super far away from making teams.
Yeah, no, and it's 2000s when they started cutting back on those weight classes, and it just kind of got progressively worse.
Yeah.
But for you to make that weight, like when you were doing your final push, were you within like 10, or you couldn't even get that close before you did your final push?
About 10 to 12 is what I would cut in the last. Yeah. Yeah, but so and that was what I talk about. My first time down, which would have been the 2007 U.S. Open. Like I said, I didn't want to sacrifice my college career, so I maybe started shrinking a little bit, but not that much. So the Open's a month after the NCAAs, and so I was in that process of getting small, and that weight cut was really hard on me. And I fell off a cliff the next day, and that's why I see someone like Sammy Sasso fall off a cliff at the All-Star, and I'm like, I know what that feels like. Like, I had great cardio. My cardio was outstanding, but when you cut weight like that, And the next day it was like, I even wrestled good for 2 matches. And then the third match, I felt like, oh my God, I can't move. This is
Just
terrible.
hits
Like,
you.
it hits you. And I'm just like, yeah, I was like, yeah, I felt like my whole body was in mud.
So all summer, you just must have been leaning out like literally 7 days a week.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, pretty much. And and now you hear Gilman talk about not staying too light. But I didn't have that. I didn't have an expert nutrition helping me with it, so it was like like I said, probably nice lean weight is probably 180 to 185. And college seasons I was probably like 177, 178, but to make that, I had to be probably walking out of practice at 170, which means I was probably like 172 to 173. And just the extra 5 pounds was really hard for me.
yeah. Well, and guys, I want to get to some of the stuff you mentioned at the end around sports psych, but there's so much awesome stories about you, hitting rock bottom in college, finding scrambling, working with Ironman and the battles with Pendleton. And so I really encourage folks to get the book. It's called Funky. And a lot of, and if you need more, the flow doc that they did on you was awesome. I loved hearing kind of inside your mind on how you were thinking 3, 4, 5 moves ahead. One of the questions I had that I couldn't wait to ask you is, you were really an innovator in scrambling.
Yeah.
How much do you think is still left on the table that people have not even scratched the surface on? Like, do you think 5% of Division I All-Americans are at like what you would say a proficient level, or not even close to that?
Oh no, no. Oh, okay, that's not the question. No, I think a lot of people are proficient. There's obviously still people who excel more than others. Definitely more than 5%. Scrambling has evolved a lot since that era. And what I thought you meant actually, or the question I thought you were going to ask is like, what evolutions are we still going to see? Like say like the Winn-Dixie, when Nolf did the Winn-Dixie, I'm like, golly, why didn't I think of that? Like, that's so easy, when I do it now, it's like, oh, this is so dumb. Like, how did I miss that? And I think that's how like it feels. Some moves, it feels like that. I think what if you look at kind of the progression of what's happened. So obviously you do need to be proficient in scrambling, but a lot of the stuff that's really became popular in this last handful of years is like, how do I not scramble, right? So like a down block go behind is way different than it was 10, 15 years ago, where you could, they shoot and you hustle the corner quick and you get behind without really a scramble forced. Or, one of the things that's become really popular is shooting off people's fakes now, right? They fake and booby blast, and that really, you can take them down without an ensuing scramble most of the time, So those type of things have been getting really popular because I think people realize, okay, and this is a little bit, it's a little bit good thing, a little bit false thing, but how can I score as easy as possible? And the easiest way would be to attack you without you being able to come back and scramble with me. But then the notion of I can do this to everyone and I'll never be in a scramble. That's faulty thinking. Like, someone will be able to create that with you, and you do have to have at least a base level of proficiency with those scrambles.
Got it. And if you think back to when you were at your Folkstyle prime, the depth you knew about scrambling, I'm sure it's much more now as you've coached it.
Yes.
Are there people that you've seen, you don't have to mention them, but are there people who have come close to that, that you've seen that really impressed you with some new scrambling innovations?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think that obviously the most impressive I just brought him up was Jason Nolf. I think he was really an innovator. And there's been a few other guys, David Taylor, Nickel did a lot of really interesting things. Yanni does as well. Keegan now is kind of pushing the envelope. So yeah, I think I think this stuff is becoming commonplace, and then the difference that these guys have today, which I didn't have at all, or my era is access to film. You can watch everything now, so you can go watch the best guys. And I tell people, obviously I created some of the scramble stuff that I did, but a big part of what I did was aggregating things and then filling in the gaps. Like how do things go together? So like I see this guy do this and I say, oh, that's interesting, right? And I see that guy do that and I say, oh, that's interesting. And then I think like, well, wait, if I just do this thing in the middle, these things go together. Now I have 3 things that all work together, as like a unit, so stuff like that. So I think I did a lot of that. And that was really important because then it wasn't just like, one move here and one move there. It was like a system. It was like a thing that functioned together to be effective.
And I love how you emphasize in the book that it wasn't about your style. It was about just finding a way to win and win
Yes.
consistently.
Yes.
Okay.
100%. No, that's one of the most important things for me in my life. I talk about it all the time, but uh is, man, stop being too proud, stop having biases, stop liking things. Like if we just go wrestle, what is the right tool for the job? Yeah, that's it. What's the right tool for the job? Don't have any personal feelings towards it. Just figure out what the right tool is and use it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. Page 170. And this,
Oh,
let's go, baby. All right. This is amazing. Some kids think if I lose this wrestling tournament, people will think less of me. It's a harmful way to think because the end result of that mindset is performance anxiety. And you go on to go a lot on this topic. This is just something that's so near and dear to me. And a lot of people I know, and a lot of parents who listen to this podcast, they reach out to me kind of saying the same thing. So
yes.
if I lose this wrestling tournament, people will think less of me. Where do you think that comes from, and how are you helping your guys around it?
So it is absolutely the most asked question on Mental Monday. That I do on my Facebook page.
Fantastic, by the way.
Thank you. So,
Yeah.
well, I think the one way we try to focus on it, and it's not foolproof, right, is effort. We praise effort. That's all we want. If you give us great effort, we're gonna help you figure it out over the course of time. Maybe not tomorrow, but we're gonna progress in the right direction. So emphasizing effort is huge. I think whether parents like to, whether they mean to or not mean to, and I would say I would lean towards most of them don't mean to. Sometimes they create this in kids because even like I'll tell a parent, right? Hey man, like I don't want you to get excited or emotional while your kid's wrestling, you know? And like one of them would be like, the main thing we need to focus on is them keeping their emotional control of what's going on, you know? And then the match is close and the parents are like, and they're yelling crazy, and then I literally say like, hey, like you can't handle this. You can't handle this. You're a detriment to your child right now. Just go sit in the stands. Let me do my job. You pay me to coach your kid. Let me coach your kid. You know?
Wow.
And so parents have a hard time of letting go of the results and praising effort. They really do. Because it's so easy, right? It's so easy to say, oh, you won, great job, or you lost, terrible job. It's simple. It's the scoreboard tells us what we should say every time, right? Versus like how much effort, because effort is, I don't want to say it's arbitrary, but once you get a trained eye, you can tell when a kid is giving really great effort and when they stay focused and and when they keep fighting versus when they don't. And so I can say to a kid, that wasn't your best effort. That was crap. You gave up in the third period. And they have a hard time arguing with me because it's like, no, I saw it. I know I'm right on this one. You're going to listen or not, Whereas if a parent says that to them, that's going to be like World War III. You know what I'm saying? Like for real though.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if a parent says that to a kid, that's like World War III. And so, it's way easier for a parent to praise results. Oh, great job, you won, regardless of what, even if the kid was winning big and then they started, gassing and they gave up and they still won because they were ahead by enough. Like, no, that's not a good performance. Sorry. So that's kind of, I think, a big portion of it. And then I think that the other thing, I talk about ego and outcome is like knowing, the kid knowing or feeling as if they're valued and they're loved, regardless of what the outcome is. I think that's a big one. And if you're praising the right things, I think they're going to feel good about that. But if not, then they're going to feel threatened.
And because of that, do you let parents in the room at AWA?
We do. Yes, we do. I think I think our parents do a great job. I really, I don't have an issue with barely any of them at all. But I think it is because we approach it head on. If we see something we don't like, we go talk to them immediately because we know they're a big part of the puzzle for the kid, right? If the kid's gonna have success, most of the time the parent's gonna have to be a beneficial for them, not more of a negative. So we go approach the parents. We in our parents meeting at the beginning of every U season, I give out I quote sections from a certain book, 3 certain books I really like, and then I really recommend the parents read them. And I think a lot of them do go read these books. Yeah, so I think it's really important for the parents to be bought in and tied in because the kids are going to need the parents to be successful.
What are the books?
The Art of Learning, Mindset, and Talent Code.
Awesome.
Yeah, 3 really good books. If you haven't read those, I would recommend you read them.
I've not read the first one. The other two I have read. Carol
So the
Dweck,
Art
is
of
that the
Learning,
one?
yeah, the Art of Learning has a great part about performance anxiety. So it's a guy named Josh Waitzkin, and he was actually the subject of the Searching for Bobby Fischer movie. He was a
Yeah.
guy who had a ton of success doing chess. And there's a couple of sections. I think it's the section that I put in the pamphlet is he said like I don't remember if it was a national championship or so. He lost a really big match, right? And I think he was 11, I want to say 11 or 12, somewhere in there, And he said, at these tournaments, he would see a lot of parents just freaking go after their kids for losing, right? Because, obviously the parent probably has too much ego because they feel like it's a reflection on themselves if the kid loses, which that happens in wrestling too, unfortunately. That especially the Millie Macho dads think if their kid looks like a wimp, it's a reflection on them. And that, for real, no joke.
Yeah.
That can turn out poorly. But so he said, I lost this big match. My dad knew how much it mattered to me. He knew he didn't have to say anything, and he just took us on a fishing vacation or something to get away from it, And so it was like, oh, like, that's kind of impactful for a parent to hear. Because I always say this, if kids are going to be great, it's got to be the kid driving it. It can't be me. It can't be the parent. It can't be anyone. It's got to be the kid. The kid's got to say, this is what I want to do, And when a kid says, this is what I want to do, and they lose, you don't got to yell at them. You probably just got to give them a hug most of the time.
Reminds me of a story Pat Smith told me, and we documented this in the Smiths, but his first year at Fargo, he got thumped. And his dad comes up to him after like crying for 25 minutes, and he's like, let's go get some ice cream.
Yeah.
That's it. I mean, and he had that internal self-drive to do it himself.
Yeah.
And what you just said kind of hits on one of my favorite quotes from your book, that a lot of what your success is chalked up to is blue-collar progression with eternal beginner mindset. Like just another freaking awesome thing to think about. Last question I want to ask you, Ben. You mentioned that you have 25 base wrestling skills. You don't go into them in the book, which I wish you would have just had an appendix with like
it's not technical skills though.
So what is so tell us
this was an argument I made I had an argument with Christian Piles on talent, and my wife's in the other room, so I can't speak too loud because she's gonna come here. It makes her so mad. So she's gonna come here and try to yell at me or something. But I say talent doesn't exist. But so one of the arguments I make in wrestling is, okay, what types of skills, just naturally, kids start wrestling the first day when they're 7 years old. What types of skills could they have that would help them be good at wrestling? Okay, so you have things like speed, strength, balance, flexibility, right? These ones are obvious, but then you have like the mental skills of like intelligence obviously helps, persistence, discipline, and so you start going through this like litany of things that could help you be a good wrestler. And so even if you were to score someone like Jordan Burroughs, who's one of the greatest of all time, he's probably not going to score at the top of every category, right? Because there's some things that are in opposition. Like, for example, someone who's got great cardio, which should help you for wrestling, generally does not have the best speed, And actually, so Burroughs, I think people overrate his speed, and I think he's in a really good range where he's like above average speed, where it's negligent to his cardio. Right, he can still go hard for 6 minutes, And then obviously part of that is toughness as well, right? Is another category in that. So, so no one is going to score at the top of those categories. So then it's like, okay, well, if I had to say, I want to make an NCAA Division I champion wrestler, is there an aggregate number I got to score in all those categories? Is there an average I got to hit? If I have like really, really elite of cardio, can I be low on speed or strength? Maybe, so it's, but then I go back to, if we're really talking talent, it's from the womb when they come out of the mother. And so it's like, I bring my kids up. It's like, my kids have been around wrestling the whole time. We roughhouse a lot. We love to just kind of like wrestle and play and battle. And, so they've been doing that forever. So by the time Alex ever did her first wrestling class at age 5, she had been used to that roughhousing and that battling and that playing. And, so then you see, I run wrestling academy. So I see some kids who come in and they're 9 years old and they've literally never done a sport. I mean, I literally have this where the parent says, hey, I have done a bad job. I haven't got my kid involved in sport and I want them to get involved in something. or maybe they tried a team sport and they're like, oh, the kid hated a team sport, right? So, oh, maybe they do wrestling and they're 9 years old and they're really soft and gushy. And so it's not like, okay, well, if we're talking about talent, it's not where they are right now because they've sat on the couch for 9 years and done nothing. It's like, well, what could 9 years is a long time. Like, I know they're only 9 years old and that seems really young, but what could that kid have been doing if his family was, health conscious, outside exercising, climbing on the monkey bars? Like I mean, I might trick my kids. I build a monkey bars in my basement and they think it's awesome. But I know also, like, hey, they're getting a workout, they're getting stronger. That's going to be good for them, and they think it's just fun. But it's like, well, this is going to be beneficial to them, even if they don't realize it's going to be beneficial to them, So it's like, yeah. So I don't want to get in that discussion because my wife's going to come try to fight me. Which a lot of people do. I said Michael Malice tried to fight me over that comment also, but that's how I think about it for wrestling.
It's interesting because I know you have fun poking some jabs at the Iowa folks, and literally 2 weeks ago though, Terry Brands told me he said that hard work is a talent, which maybe might be something that you might align with. Like, do you agree with that, or do you think talent in general is just a weird word that doesn't have any meaning?
I think people are confused about what the meaning of it is. For me, it would be the innate ability to have success at something. And I just don't think people come out of the womb like that. I think when post facto you give credit for certain things, you're like, oh, that kid was really good because he was really strong, right? It's like, well, how did he, or for me, I'll just say for me, people said, oh, I had a great feel for wrestling. Like, did I have that when I came out of my mom? Like, I don't think I did. Like, I think it was because I was on the mat all the freaking time. I think that probably has a really good reason I had such a good feel for wrestling, right? So you're post facto, you're trying to attribute my success to something you wouldn't have seen ahead of the fact.
Mm-hmm. Well, and to that end, let's wind down with this. Which of the 25 skills do you think are most neglected, or is there one that you think really just is totally overlooked?
Well, I mean, the obvious athleticism parts of like speed and strength. Those are the ones that are obvious that everyone sees. And it's easy to point out and say, oh my God, look how fast that kid is. He's going to be good, and whereas something like balance would be obviously, and again, listen, I don't think people come out of the womb with this. It's something that's developed and, through early childhood or whatever, through wrestling, and so you would say, oh, if their balance is great, it's probably something they've developed, not something that was innate. But it's also harder to see than strength or speed. But I would say generally the mental ones, because the mental ones are absolutely hard to work on, right? It's way easier to say, hey, go lift these weights and get stronger. That's simple, right? Or, hey, go do these single legs and get better at a single leg. But to, pick up on some of the mental characteristics, like a persistence, right? Or a big, I'll tell you the problem solving, right? The ability to problem solve within a match is something very, very few people are elite at, but it's so important. And then that carries over to life, because say you're having a business meeting with someone, right? And so essentially you're trying to get someone to go with your company or buy your product, right? And you start with a goal, a game plan, and in the middle of the meeting, some people won't realize it, but the meeting's going terrible, and the person they're not seeing what you're seeing. And so you have to literally problem solve here. Okay, this person's not seeing what I'm seeing, right? Or I got taken on a whole bunch. How do I, within this match or this meeting, how do I flip the script and problem solve in such a manner? What tools do I have that can solve this problem that I'm doing right now? Like, I think that's a really neglected one.
And you say a lot, you hate bad strategy. Like, that just
I
drives you
just talked about it this
crazy.
morning. I just talked
Really?
about it on FRL. Which match was I talking about bad strategy in? Was it Iowa Penn? I don't think it was Iowa Penn. I don't remember which match it was. Yeah, we're talking about bad strategy. I hate bad strategy.
Hate it, man. Well, Ben, it's always fun to have you on, and I'm really glad you wrote this book. I enjoyed reading it, and I hope to one day sit down with my kids and share some of this knowledge. You need to write a book on parenting at some point. I think that would be really.
I'm trying to write one on sports psychology, so specifically.
Do you still have all those surveys you sent out?
We have those. I was just thinking about the other day. They're in my basement. Yes.
Wow.
I know. I was kind of thinking like, hey, I should probably publish them at some way, shape, or form. I did not, but that'd be weird because I would have to go get permission, because I didn't tell those people I was going to publish them as is. I told them they would be used for like quotes in the book and that type of stuff.
How the hell did you track down all those addresses?
I don't even
Just
remember how.
manual? Because you
Yeah,
should do it now. No, you do whatever you want, but I think it'd be interesting to redo the survey with this group the past 10 years and see if there's been any big changes.
that would be interesting. How did I have no idea how I tracked down all those addresses. Yeah, but it was mail. It wasn't, don't think it was email at that point in time because it was 2006. Maybe it was. I know because we have the physical written copies.
Right.
So at the very least, it was mailed back to us. So yeah, fascinating.
Man, really fascinating. Ben, thanks for coming on, man. Have a great day and wish you all the best.
Appreciate it. Have a great day.